Imagine having your card declined on a cheap cup of noodles. No feast, just survival. Just a dusty cup from the very bottom shelf, my desperate survival food when rent was due and payday was light years away. The cashier stared at the screen, then shot me a look like I was playing a game without knowing the rules. Someone behind me groaned. Harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making my empty stomach feel even worse. Tapping again did absolutely nothing. My phone screen showed a flat zero. For a second, I thought the bank app had just crashed. I refreshed, checking the main balance. I checked the digits again. Math was the only thing I really trusted. Counting pennies carefully was how I survived all these years. But get this, every single cent was gone. On the counter, the cashier tapped a tray holding a small glass marble. "One clear," he muttered. I just stared. He said it again, not like he was explaining some new trend, but like warning a really slow kid. "One clear." Hearing that hit me way harder than it should have. People had called me cheap, weird, and totally useless before, but this felt different. It was like the world itself saying I could not afford to live. The price tag did not show yen. Instead, it had a little white circle marked as one clear. Drinks had red circles, rice bags had green, and the high-end locked cabinet had bright blue tags under the glass. A lady at the next lane tossed 2 clear marbles into her tray to buy some bottled water. Some delivery guy paid with a single red and got a few clears back as change. Nobody laughed. That made it 10 times worse. If this was a joke, someone would have smiled too early. Had it been a technical glitch, the worker would have blamed the machine. Instead, the crowd behind me shuffled impatiently, completely used to this bizarre new reality. Cash was dead. Marbles were king. My hand instinctively squeezed the glass keychain buried in my pocket. I kept that cheap toy for years, mostly because I loved watching light shine through it. They called it childish. My boss, Daichi Kuroda, actually grabbed it during a meeting, mocking me by asking if I paid my bills with toys. Now, the cashier stared straight at my clenched fist. For the first time all evening, someone actually looked at me like I mattered. I kept it hidden. I simply did not know enough yet. Backing away empty-handed, that impatient guy pushed past me before I could even fully turn around. He tossed a single clear bead into the dish. The register dinged. That chime echoed in my head. 1 clear. The price of food, of being normal, and of not being left behind. Walking home with a growling stomach and an empty account, one crazy thought suddenly drowned out my embarrassment. Now check this out, if one tiny clear bead bought dinner, what was my secret stash at home worth? Before this madness, my whole survival was dictated by tiny numbers. Subway tickets, rent, electric bills, and cheap lunches bought strictly after 2 p.m. Just weighing the price of instant store noodles versus a bag of dry pasta near the train station. I calculated every single penny, because forgetting meant starving. When you are this poor, any little slip-up just proves people like Kuroda are completely right about you. Daichi Kuroda was my nightmare supervisor at Shiranami Data Services. He never needed to yell. Humiliation always cut way deeper when the office was completely silent, and he knew how to use that. He would drop my report on the desk upside down, asking if I had ever learned to read. If a client suddenly changed their mind after I turned in flawless work, every error became Ren's latest adventure in confusion. In our office, laughing at others was survival. I learned to stay completely invisible. That became my very first real weapon. Keep my face deadpan while my ears burned with shame. Just reply with a quiet yes, Kuroda-san, counting every single second until he walked away. Everyone took my silence for weakness except Hana Amari. Hana was just a temp accountant working a couple rows down. She checked every ledger like she was hunting down criminals. When she first noticed me, Kuroda was blaming me for a mistake that would have stolen 3 people's overtime. I did not do it, but in our toxic workplace, shouting loudest meant you were right. Hana double-checked the files and declared the edit happened after Ren submitted his work. That adjustment came straight from your account, Kuroda-san. Instant, dead silence. Kuroda brushed it off as a glitch, but Hana stared at me with calculating eyes. Back home, I ran a completely different ledger. Behind my closed closet doors stood 3 shelves loaded with black velvet cases, packed with marbles meticulously sorted by color, size, and source. Clear glass with trapped air bubbles and deep reds glowing warm. Forest greens turning smoky under the sun, ocean blues, and then my absolute favorite purple. Purple marbles were my weakness, not because they were rare. Back then, nobody wanted them. Other collectors ignored them, so shopkeepers literally threw them into discount bins. I snatched them up cheap from estate sales and closing shops. Kuroda once spotted a shipping slip on my desk and sneered, asking why I spent money on useless trash. I quietly told him I just liked the colors. He laughed, calling it the exact loser answer he expected from a man with absolutely no future. I swallowed my pride. Fighting back would only show him how to use my passion against me. So I just kept counting and organizing. I spent my tiny savings on things that brought order, while the rest of my life belonged to louder men. Then, my card got declined. I had already been humiliated twice today. Stiffed on my pay, and told by Kuroda that interns looked more alive than me. I just wanted one warm meal. But then, the system collapsed right at the register. Get ready for this twist. The things everyone called useless glass, they were the only assets I had left. I backed away from the checkout line but did not actually leave. Faking a phone check, I lingered quietly near the magazines while my stomach growled. The clerk had already ignored me. To him, I was just another loser failing to survive. But I needed to figure out this new reality. The digital menu overhead suddenly flickered. The numbers vanished, dissolving into a series of colored circles. Clear was for cheap stuff, a simple rice ball, water, or cup ramen. Red meant real comfort, hot food, strong coffee, or medicine behind the counter. Green covered weekly groceries, subway passes, and basic household items. Blue was for expensive gear, phones, and rental deposits. The store became a classroom, and watch this: a student gets rejected trying to pay normally. Before his card scanned, the cashier just shook her head. An old man stared blankly at paper bills like they were worthless relics. A wealthy guy in a fancy coat had 0 marbles and instantly became a beggar. A dirty delivery worker with 3 red marbles and a handful of clears stepped up, and everyone immediately parted for him. The hierarchy had just flipped. Before anyone could even vote, they replaced it. My banking app just updated on its own. A massive banner popped up, stating all legacy balances were now converted to the marble standard. No apologies. No button to return my rent money. Just a guide at the bottom. 1 clear marble equaled $1 in basic value. A red one was worth 10. Green meant 100. Blue was 1,000. Then, the entire guide glitched. For a split second, a mysterious 5th line popped up right under blue. Purple pinnacle classification restricted, authentication required. The screen refreshed and it vanished. My chest tightened, my heart was absolutely hammering. Purple. I stared at that single clear marble in the cashier's tray, then at the red ones in the delivery guy's hand, then at the blue tag on the locked cabinet. Colors, materials, recognition. This crazy world wasn't asking for digital bank numbers anymore. It wanted real, physical objects you could count, sort, fake, or verify. That wasn't Kuroda's world at all. This was a collector's playground. I carefully slid my scratched marble keychain out of my pocket, then stopped myself. Desperate people spend first and think later. Real collectors check condition before touching anything. I left that shop hungry, but definitely not empty. Outside, crowds gathered under massive screens. Storefront signs were instantly updating their colors. Vending machines completely rejected tap payments, until a kid dropped a clear marble into a fresh slot that wasn't there this morning. See, this standard wasn't just local. This wasn't some minor glitch, it was everywhere. My apartment was 28 minutes away if I hurried, 16 if I sprinted in stiff dress shoes and ignored how ridiculous I looked. I ran. With every single step, one phrase haunted me: 1 clear. It started as a counter-insult, but now it was currency. 1 clear for some ramen. I had hundreds of them in my closet. Plus, behind that hidden line of text, purple. My cheap apartment had never felt this incredibly valuable before. That night, every single dusty corner looked like a perfect hiding spot. The tight closet, the cheap bins under the bed, and those black felt cases hidden under an old sheet right where I left them. I locked the door, drew the shades, dragged the first case out, and opened my record book. Clear marbles were first 532. Before tonight, that was just some random stat in my records. Now, it meant survival, actual subway fare, and never starving over instant noodles again. The red box held 1,032. Green had 382. Blue held 249. I leaned back, looking at the blues. That was serious, life-changing money. Enough to wipe my debts clean and prepay my rent months ahead. You feel that, right? I could buy whatever I wanted without even checking prices. That should have been the miracle. But hiding behind those organized cases were the dusty bulk boxes. Purple ones. Nested inside foam trays, tucked into cheap sleeves, just piles of purple, wrapped in old newspapers from random estate sales. Some looked smoky, others flashed bright inner veins, and some looked pitch black until a light touched the rim and violet fire erupted along the edge. The ones nobody wanted. The ones I saved because ignored things deserved to be seen. My hands began sorting them automatically. Logging case numbers, row counts, purchase dates, and any minor flaws. Double-checked. 8,473 purples. I searched every forum, every leaked screenshot, and every single online thread before they got wiped. That exact warning flashed on my screen repeatedly. A pinnacle marble, valued at $10 million each, requiring official exchange gate validation. I faced security audits. Unverified trading was strictly banned. I sat on the floor, surrounded by black cases, doing the math. 8,000 times $10 million. This was not just wealth, this was an entire nation hiding in my bedroom. Think about that kind of power. I immediately pictured Kuroda's smug face. I wanted to walk right into his office and toss a single purple gem down. Buying the building and making him repeat his jokes seemed pretty sweet. The fantasy felt incredibly satisfying. Honestly, that petty urge scared me more than the wealth. That screen warning stayed active, tracking everything. Heavy security audits and stability controls could lock down everything. My new power definitely came with heavy strings attached. So I did my usual routine counting, sorting, and separating. I took photos of the cases, saved my spreadsheets, and sorted out some common marbles. Packing the red, green, and blue ones into a pouch, I hid the purple cases under my floorboards. I barely slept. By sunrise, I went straight back to the convenience store to buy my cheap ramen. Using a clear marble, I watched the clerk stare until the validation screen finally flashed green. His gaze immediately darted to my small bag. I kept quiet. The cheap food somehow tasted like absolute victory. I saved the purple ones. First, I had to prove my worth to a crowd that always looked down on me. The corporate lunchroom opened right at noon. By lunchtime, the entire office had transformed into a chaotic trading floor. No one cared about work deadlines. Everyone was obsessed with who owned what marbles. They argued over color tiers and whether landlords would start demanding expensive blue ones. Overnight, prices spiked. Even simple coffee cost one clear. A basic tray cost red, while the green tag premium meals had everyone staring like they were rare museum treasures. I waited at the very back of the queue, holding my cheap pouch tight. Kuroda spotted me, smirking. He called out to Aoki, asking if I could even afford to stand there since noodles cost one clear. That clear marble was pretty steep for a guy with zero savings, he sneered. A couple of coworkers chuckled automatically. It was a nervous, quiet laugh, since the crazy new world had everyone on edge, but the disrespect felt familiar. Looking at the counter, I saw a stack of unpaid bills from employees whose cards had failed earlier. Janitors, 2 junior workers, even a stressed kitchen worker was there. Kuroda completely mistook my quiet reaction for total defeat. He scoffed that there was no shame in quitting, or well, maybe some shame, but it beat holding up the line. Just watch what happens next. I reached in, and the entire room suddenly went dead silent. Voices dropped as the room went quiet. I placed one blue marble down. Not clear, not red, blue. The bright overhead lights hit the jewel, making the entire crowd gasp. The cashier froze. When the cashier stammered that it was too much, I told her to clear every single unpaid bill, and she could put the leftover balance into the staff fund. I did not need a flashy speech as the validation screen flashed a massive confirmation message. One after another, those unpaid slips got stamped settled. Even the cleaning lady gasped in pure disbelief. A junior coworker whispered my name under his breath, like it was some sacred word. People stared directly at my worn keychain, silently counting every single color they saw. Kuroda was not laughing. Forget the food or the cash, that absolute silence was my very first real victory. For just a second, the office that used to look down on me had no clue how to react. Then Kuroda smiled again. This was not his usual mocking grin. It was much slower, and way hungrier than before. Aoki, he said, seems you have been keeping some big secrets. Hannah stood just 2 tables away, holding a tray tightly in her hands. She glanced at my blue marble, then at me, and finally at Kuroda with a deeply worried expression. Her reaction bothered me way more than it should have. I grabbed my food and sat alone. 4 people avoided me then because I was easy to mock. Now they stayed away because they were recalculating the heavy cost of crossing me. Part of me wanted to flash another blue marble. And another. Just so everyone realized they had been mocking someone who could literally buy their respect by the truckload. Instead, I just ate slowly. The blue marble was gone, and my secret purple reserve stayed hidden. That was discipline, I told myself. But look at him there staring at me, making me realize the brutal first rule of my new life. Once they see your true worth, people do not apologize, they crawl to you. Kuroda did not even wait a single day before trying to hijack what he used to mock. He was too fake to ask for my marbles directly, of course. Instead, he set up a sudden compliance meeting, CCing the managers and a human resources officer. The subject line was so incredibly boring, it was actually terrifying. Review of potential company asset misclassification. At noon, I sat inside a glass meeting room as Kuroda spread printed papers before me like courtroom evidence. Storage logs, expense sheets, and old inventory files. Plus, a photo of my marble keychain next to office supplies. "We are not accusing you," Kuroda said, which meant he totally was given the legal value of marble assets. He claimed they had to investigate if any part of my collection was obtained on company time. I just stared at that photo. It was taken during a company event 2 whole years ago. I remembered that day perfectly because Kuroda made his typical toy joke, and I wrote it in my ledger after going home angry. Back then, that journal was my comfort. Now, it was real evidence. Kuroda casually folded his hands. If office resources helped build the asset, we might have a claim. We just need some transparency. Transparency. From a guy who changed deadlines on a whim and smirked when we lost our overtime pay. My immediate instinct was to just crush him with pure wealth. I wanted to buy the entire department, offering to pay everyone's salary just to expose his dirty games. The dangerous temptation rose like heat. But watch this, Hana bursts in without knocking, carrying a tablet and looking ready to absolutely destroy him. "This meeting was never copied to accounting," she announced firmly. Kuroda's smile tightened personnel matter. "But it mentions expense claims," she countered, "which makes it accounting." She slammed her tablet down. The storage logs Kuroda was using had been heavily edited just this morning. The exact inventory form he claimed was linked to my marbles actually registered office toner cartridges. That office photo? It had absolutely zero asset value. Hana stared right at me, asking if I had the purchase records. Yes, all of them. Most were in my ledgers, packed with dates, sources, flaws, and case numbers. For the first time, the human resources officer looked interested. Kuroda leaned back, finding it convenient. Hana did not blink. Staying consistent, there is a difference. Unfortunately, the meeting did not end with a complete victory. Kuroda withdrew his strongest accusations, softening the rest into a minor review, while pretending cooperation was his plan. But everyone saw his paperwork get completely ruined. That still mattered. Afterward, I bent the screedy old back, sir. Hana cornered me near the dark stairwell. She told me not to bring high-value marbles here. I said I knew, but she snapped that I only thought this was about embarrassing Kuroda. "It is not about him," she warned, showing me an online forum thread. "Unknown office worker pays off cafeteria debt using a blue. Suspected hidden holder, keychain collector, seeking any purple confirmation." One specific username kept popping up over and over, Blue Vault Scout. Hana lowered her voice. "These guys are completely ruthless. If they even suspect you're holding a purple marble, you are in serious trouble." That night, I relocated the purple cases once again. I split their locations and photographed the seals, hiding a second ledger in an old cookbook because no one would expect me to cook. At midnight, the first anonymous thread arrived, claiming they knew I had more than blue, followed by another 10 minutes later. It claimed Blue Vault could protect me before the exchange noticed. The third warning was brief: do not authenticate purple alone. Sitting alone in the dark, I realized that Kuroda was no longer the biggest threat to my survival. He was just the first small obstacle. 3 days later, the massive Central Marble Exchange officially noticed me. A summons appeared on every single screen I owned at exactly 8 in the morning. Older classification review requested. Attendance required at Exchange Gate 7. Failing to respond could completely restrict my future authentication rights. Requested really meant required. Reading over my shoulder, Hana warned me not to go alone. I admitted I wasn't planning to tell her, but she insisted that was exactly why she had to warn me. Exchange Gate 7 was just a regular bank branch before the entire world changed. Now, heavy reinforced glass covered the doors, and cold validation counters replaced the old ATM wall. People lined up, nervously clutching pouches, jars, and jewelry boxes. And anything else that could hold marbles. The clear holders looked utterly desperate. Red holders looked incredibly nervous, green ones seemed guarded, while blue holders had heavy security surrounding them. Above us, a giant black screen displayed only one line: "Value must be authenticated to be protected." Sounds totally reasonable, right? But it is a massive trap. Authentication meant records, records meant classification, and classification meant control. They escorted us past the busy public counters into a private room where Director Seiji Kanzaki waited with an open folder. The director was younger than I expected, with a calm smile that felt completely manufactured. His simple suit matched a voice that was incredibly gentle. He did not need to threaten me because the building did it for him, calling out my name, Ikki Ren, a private holder, an employee of Shiranami Data Services. He noted my recent blue class transaction and exposure to rare rumors, while Hana sat silently beside me. Hana argued that rumors are not evidence, but Kanzaki just smiled, saying markets do not wait before reacting. He slowly slid a single purple marble right across the table. It was not mine, the flaw pattern was completely wrong, with a thin silver vein striking like lightning. Still, my body reacted before I could freeze my face, and Kanzaki definitely noticed. He said most regular people think purple is just some high-value tier. A cool 10 million old dollars per verified pinnacle marble is actually incomplete. The room felt smaller as he revealed that pinnacle marbles are voting keys, not just cash. Every single certified holder wields massive influence over general standard policies, verification limits, freeze actions, conversion ratios, and emergency stabilization orders. Purple was not cash. It was literally law disguised as money. I asked him how many actually exist. Kanzaki's eyes narrowed enough to rule, but too few to ignore concentration risks. Hana leaned in, asking what if someone controls a huge pile? Then that person becomes a massive threat to overall stability. For their safety and the market's protection, review measures will quickly apply. You mean asset freezes, temporary safeguards, or seizure? Hana pressed, but Kanzaki kept smiling coldly. Only during cases of fraud, counterfeit threats, illegal acquisition, or threats to public safety. Every word he spoke was a door he could lock. He offered us voluntary disclosure and guided protection. And let's be honest, that's just a threat dressed up as friendly advice. For a second, the smartest move was so obvious: spend cheap colors, hide the purple, let the whole outside world burn while I kept my own stash safe. But then I remembered the old man staring at worthless cash, and the student crying over a dead phone. That cafeteria cleaning lady gasping in shock when her unpaid food slip was finally marked as fully settled. This broken system made me incredibly powerful, but it left millions of regular people completely defenseless. Once we stepped outside, Hana muttered, "If you only use this power to hide, they will end up controlling you anyway." I stared at the long line of desperate people holding cheap pouches of clear marbles. For ages, I desperately wanted proof that I mattered. Now, I possessed something so massive, the state wanted to regulate it. Honestly, I had never felt so trapped. The very first purple marble I decided to activate was not for payback. It was just for rent. 3 days after Kanzaki's warning, Shiranami announced massive payroll cuts using the new standard. The memo was perfectly clear: all back overtime was getting audited. Payouts were delayed, and temporary workers would only get credits after endless verifications. To bosses, it was a minor delay. But for workers at the bottom, it meant immediate eviction. Hana shoved the list in my face, visibly furious, showing 37 low-wage employees facing eviction in just 48 hours. Cleaners, temp workers, and night shift janitors, the real people keeping this company alive, while high-paid managers held useless meetings. Kuroda claimed he was completely helpless, but Hana proved it was highly selective. Big boss funds were already safely swapped into secure green and blue tiers, while poor laborers were stuck in review. Legally, the company lawyers could probably defend this trash. Morally, it was pure robbery on official corporate paper. The old Ren would have looked away, drowning in his own helplessness. But this Ren could actually help. That was the issue. Lu could help buy time for a few, but a single purple could save the entire block. The greedy landlord demanded fully cleared top-tier exchange settlements. That meant official verification and total exposure. Hana stood in my living room, staring at the open case on my table, warning me not to do this just to get Kuroda's attention. Her warning stung. I had imagined exactly that. I kept picturing his face falling while the workers thanked me and he just stood there, useless. Everyone would finally see who had real worth versus a hollow title. "So why else should I do it?" I asked, as Hana's voice softened just a tiny bit. "Because you remember how one clear felt," she said, "that completely decided it." Gate 7 authenticated the purple under 3 security cameras. 2 guards stood watch alongside a silent examiner who treated the stone like a live bomb. Then the seal flashes, pinnacle confirmed, and the entire room goes dead silent. I authorized the housing settlement immediately, sent emergency credits to the workers, and filed legal notices against their corporate landlord. Just one purple was incredibly overkill, but in this corrupt world, enough was never the point. Pure visibility was. The workers found out before corporate could sweep it away. The old janitor bowed so low I felt awkward, while the cafeteria lady wept tears of joy. Internet forums exploded. "Office nobody saves underdogs with a purple." They called me a hero, a market threat. Then Kuroda showed up late, white with fury. For once he could not fake a smile, hissing that I had no clue what I had just unleashed. And for once, I actually agreed. That night, a glowing silver seal appeared on my door, announcing an official audit hold. My assets were frozen during the review, but my lower-tier color pouch still functioned. My blue access was completely cut off, and any new purple verification now required high-level clearance. I stood out in the hall while neighbors pretended not to stare. That glowing seal made my place look exactly like a crime scene. Hana read the ban, then quietly asked if it was worth it. I wanted to scream yes. The workers got their safety. Kuroda got publicly humiliated. Everyone knew I was no joke, But deep down, I enjoyed the spotlight for the wrong reasons. I wanted everyone to watch me gain power. So I answered honestly. I told her I had no idea, and she nodded in genuine respect. Behind that locked door, my quiet apartment held enough purple glass to shatter their whole perfect world. And outside my door, the system was already beginning to fight back. After that freeze, I stopped worshipping these marbles. Treasure forces you to hide, but strict rules make you ask who created them. For 3 straight nights, Hana and I built a war room, fueled by cheap coffee and endless legal documents. Receipts, ledgers, and worker statements covered everything. Alongside every single public marble regulation we could track down. They expected me to panic like some lottery winner, but they clearly did not know who they were dealing with. I picked apart their rules like I inspect flaws in cheap glass, examining everything under multiple angles, since validation legally required proof of physical ownership and legitimate purchase. Fortunately, my purchase receipts dated back years before this marble standard existed. My ledgers detailed case numbers and flaws, along with source notes that no forger could ever fake later. I documented tiny variations in those purple gems when they were worthless, defying their claims of market instability. Their freeze rested on the lie that my holdings were unverified or fake. They only concentrated because everyone ignored them. That wasn't fraud. It was absolute arrogance meeting a cold hard ledger. Hana tracked Kuroda's paperwork attack through edits and totally false claims, and a single deleted message proving he searched company rules after my payment, not before. But my sharp ally didn't let me celebrate too early. Just beating Kuroda isn't enough, she warned, because if the exchange can freeze people on a whim, then your entire case becomes a warning, not a real victory. She was totally right. So we widened our battlefield, without buying cheap followers. I could have done that easily. Toss a few green marbles here, some blue there, and loyalty becomes gratitude. Witnesses were needed, not worshippers. Contract workers stepped up with statements, and shop owners described heavy transaction delays. Nurses described frantic patients trying to pay medical bills with frozen cards while hospitals waited for clearance. Even a junior staffer from my own floor admitted Kuroda pushed people to call me unstable after that massive blue transaction. Each story shared the exact same shape. Marble Standard claimed they recognized true value, but whoever controlled authentication held total control over survival. Watch closely, the elite Blue Vault Guild finally makes their move. They invited me to a lavish private restaurant, offering total protection, top-tier legal support, and secure vaults, along with a polished public narrative that would make me look incredibly responsible. The catch? They demanded full management rights over my purple inventory, not ownership. Just stewardship. Kuroda's dirty tactics. Kanzaki used market stability, and the guild used elegance. Everyone wanted the exact same thing. One of their smug representatives leaned in and told me that I wasn't built for this ruthless world. So we should let those who truly understand value protect it. That exact moment was when I knew I'd refuse. I recognized that pathetic line. Kuroda had regurgitated it with cheaper words for years. I slammed a printed section of the official governance code on the table. Any verified major holder could legally challenge reviews through a public petition, especially if it concerned authentication, transparency, protection against seizure, or essential holder rights. The guild representatives instantly stopped smiling, and by next morning, I filed that petition. He's calling their bluff, guys. If they call him a threat, they'll have to prove it publicly. And since those legendary purple marbles were voting keys, I'd use mine for way more than bragging rights. The massive public review was held in the Grand Metropolitan Assembly Hall. Officially, the actual exchange building simply couldn't contain the massive crowd. Kanzaki wanted flashing cameras and polished desks, creating the illusion that absolute order itself sat right behind him. Kuroda sat on the left with his fancy company lawyers, desperately trying to look like a betrayed victim. The elite Blue Vault Guild sat on the right, looking dramatically offended, as if my refusal insulted their entire civilization. Hana sat right behind me with 4 massive binders, 2 tablets, and 0 patience for their dramatic performances. Meanwhile, I sat centered with my old, worn marble ledger. Scuffed corners, handwritten dates, and faded color tabs from back when this was just a hobby people mocked me for. Kanzaki started with calm, calculated disaster warnings, describing market stability issues, public hysteria, and counterfeit risks, concentration dangers, and the urgent need to protect citizens from dangerous, unverified private power. He didn't outright call me a dangerous criminal, he didn't even have to. And Kuroda's team demanded a heavy investigation, claiming he might have made it during work hours on the company computer network. To anyone else, his logic sounded completely reasonable. But that was manager Kuroda's classic trick, dressing up pure cruelty in polite corporate speech. When the review board demanded his defense, his hands went ice cold. For a split second, he felt like that broke kid again, starving in a store. They expected him to step aside. But then, he opened his ledger. Referencing case P1, he bought it from Nishida Estate years before the standard. 32 purple marbles, 3 holding crescent flaws, and 1 with an air bubble. The registered photo instantly flashed onto the massive hall screen. Next up, case P2, an online auction of 48 mixed purple gems. He bought them dirt cheap because absolutely nobody else wanted them. Dead silence. Suddenly, the entire room completely shifted. You can see the exact moment everyone realizes he isn't just showing off. He was proving time. Right then, Hana handed over the original logs. They pulled up the old toner stock. Next, they exposed the deleted texts where Kuroda literally asked if they could seize valuable hobby assets. The lead reviewer turned to Kuroda with one heavy question. Did you raise any complaints before these marbles actually became incredibly valuable? Kuroda froze. He opened his mouth, then shut it. His silence spoke volumes. It was a massive win, a total takedown of his former boss. The main character's claim was airtight, and Kuroda was utterly ruined. No allies left. Even the guild backed away from Kuroda. But during the break, Kanzaki cornered him where the cameras could not hear. Take the protected holder status, Kanzaki offered, promising him safety and guaranteed wealth. His lower-class access would be fully restored. In exchange, he just had to freeze his public petition rights. It was a beautiful trap, a golden cage with soft bedding. For a moment, he actually considered it. No more struggling to survive, no more Kuroda, and no more disrespect. He could live like royalty without ever having to justify his existence again. He just had to ignore everyone else still stuck in line with their cheap, clear marbles. Glancing at Hana, she silently refused to choose. That was never her job, but he remembered her previous words of wisdom. Because he remembers how it felt to have nothing. Let's head back in. Kanzaki expected obedience. The guild expected a compromise. Kuroda expected him to hoard his wealth like a dragon. Instead, our hero triggered the petition. The main screen flashed a bright, blinding purple. With the system approving his claim, he spoke before Kanzaki could spin the narrative. He was not petitioning just to raise his personal cash limit. Nor was he seeking special protection. He demanded fair public standards for everyone. Strict limits preventing asset freezes without solid proof, and a fair path for regular people whose balances were wiped out by corrupt institutions. Kanzaki's calm expression cracked ever so slightly. Seeing that tiny crack was the second best moment of his life. First came that blue marble, but this victory was even bigger. This was a corrupt system, realizing the quiet underdog had outsmarted them all. To force a temporary review, you needed serious heavyweight backing. The exchange built this system for banks, elite guilds, and councils who already played their game. They definitely didn't design it for some guy buying cheap purple marbles just to catalog every single defect. But watch this, my verified standing actually triggers a public review. Other small holders started popping up on the board. Some just watched. Some backed the exchange, but a few actually threw their weight behind me. The petition cleared the emergency threshold by 14%. No revolution, no system collapse, but it was enough. The asset freeze stopped. Kuroda's property claim got thrown out, pending a full misconduct investigation. Now the exchange had to publish their rules within 7 days. They even had to open public audited support offices for ordinary holders in every single district. Kanzaki stayed totally calm because survival for him means looking unbothered. Once the chair announced the final decision, Hana let out a soft sigh that almost sounded like a laugh. Basic protection would keep me safe, but this put me dead center. Every single camera locked onto me. Every faction quickly recalculated, and every hidden player now knew my name. I stared at the old ledger, tracing the handwriting of a guy who cataloged worthless glass just to find some kind of order in his messy life. And then I shut it. For once in my life, I did not actually want the world to be afraid of me. I just wanted them to stop treating normal folks like trash until some corrupted system gave them worth. Walking back into the office felt completely different, not nicer, just different. Being nice would be too easy, and people get weirdly complicated when they realize they misjudged someone with real power. By Friday, Kuroda's name was completely erased from our department's signing loop. They claimed it was a procedural audit. But we all knew better. He wasn't taken down by a grand speech or a punch to the face. He got absolutely wrecked by the exact same weapon he used to crush others. Pure records. Now, whenever he walks across the room, the conversations die instantly. Not because they're scared of him, but because they remember those doctored files, those dirty lies, and the exact second he totally choked on a basic question. He suddenly calls my name across the floor, making everyone instantly freeze up. They all expected me to look down, but I just stared right back. That was it. You've got to love this. Kuroda's mouth tightens, and he's the one who looks away first. Under emergency review, the safety rules for worker housing officially became the law. The exchange had to lift the freeze on my main assets, and that annoying audit seal on my door vanished once the first rules went public. I wasn't entirely out of the woods. My life would never be safe again, but they had to acknowledge me. All because of that ledger, because of the solid proof, and because my quiet habits were suddenly much stronger than Kuroda's fancy title. Even my coworkers changed. Some got so desperately polite it actually felt way worse than their regular cruelty. Others gave vague apologies just to pretend they had always been nice. A few avoided me because facing me meant facing their own guilt. One junior kid brought me tea and admitted he should have spoken up sooner, so I just stared at him. I told him, yeah, but he can speak up next time, and that was all I had for him. I was finally learning that showing mercy doesn't mean pretending you never got hurt. Hana stayed focused on the actual work, totally ignoring the praise. She spearheaded a class action, rallying victims to fight those endless, corrupt delays. And she refused every single cent I offered, telling me to pay the court, not her. Blue Vault Collector Guild released a PR statement desperately claiming they loved transparency, which basically meant they lost this round, and desperately wanted everyone to completely forget their dirty hands. Hanzaki even went on national television, calmly lying that the exchange welcomed these new rules. He still looked completely unfazed. That was dangerous. Kuroda wanted my marbles, and the guild wanted my whole inventory. But Hanzaki? He wanted the rules, and he still controlled most of them. I had won enough to stand upright, but not enough to stop staring at the ceiling. Look closely here under the dim room light. The purple rose inside my case still glows. Still stunning. Still highly dangerous. Still entirely mine. But they were no longer proof of my worth. True proof comes from what you do when you are finally doing more than just surviving. 1 week later, I returned to that exact same convenience store. The cheap ramen shelf was finally restocked. The price was still one clear marble. I stared at it way longer than noodle cups deserve. This time, the clerk actually recognized me. The news only showed my face in formal clips, but the online forums had already turned me into 10 wildly different rumors. A secret billionaire, a hoarder, or a vengeful office demon. But none of those labels mattered as much as the clear marble I laid on the counter. One clear for ramen. The old register chimed. And this time, that sound did not feel like shame. Outside, I sat on a bench near the station, eating with warm steam on my face. Hana sat down with tea. She insisted on paying for herself, keeping her strict boundaries intact as always. She warned me that I would totally hate this. My usual welcome, I sighed, as she turned the screen to face me. A highly classified alert from the exchange popped up under an unfamiliar header. International Pinnacle Coordination Council, detailing foreign exchange blocks, plus emergency voting, and a full origin inquiry. At the bottom, one line pulsed in bright purple. Look at that. Summoning Aoki Ren, verified concentration holder, and this time, I understood. Requested meant mandatory. Beyond Japan, other secret holders were starting to move. Families holding purple keys. Global councils that had known the truth from the very beginning. Maybe even the ones who turned cash into glass. My legal petition had not shattered the standard, it had only caused a massive first crack, and everyone heard it. I stared down at my instant ramen, my marble bag, and then over at Hana. You do not have to come, I said. She glared at me like a bad spreadsheet, asking if she should let me read boring legal footnotes alone. I would become completely unbearable. For the first time in forever, I smiled without looking over my shoulder. The world was still counting up my purples. 8,472 remained unverified, hidden away, and scattered in secret locations only my records could map. A fortune to tempt kings, and terrifying authority to make governments shake. Absolute danger, making any normal privacy impossible. But I was no longer that helpless guy at the cash register. No longer the office joke, the silent punching bag, or the lonely guy waiting for others to see his true value. This world went and changed the rules without asking me. Now, I'm finding out who wrote them. And this time, when that next massive gate cracks open, I'm not stepping aside for anyone.